Welcome to the Conscious Parenting Summit. How to confidently step into parenting from conception, through birth, and beyond, learning to trust the inner guidance of love. I am your host, Quinne Brown Huffman, DOULA Quinne, and the mission of this summit is to support aspiring parents, pregnant parents, and parents that might be lost in the overwhelm of the responsibility. Today I'm super excited because we have Robyn Sheldon joining us. It is a thrill for me. She is an author and a midwife, and she has so much to offer in this space. Her practice is in Cape Town, and she teaches an avant-garde birthing process with incredible results. Like I said, she's a midwife, an integration therapist, a soul connection doula trainer, and a meditation facilitator. Robyn specializes in helping pregnant women release birth fear and create trauma-free births for their babies. Incorporating a variety of disciplines in her work, Robyn has a formal education in the spheres of art, midwifery, integration therapy, teaching and doula training, and she also has more than 20 years of in-depth experience in meditation practice and is a certified biodanza dance facilitator. Robyn wrote The Mama Bamba Way to describe her birth philosophies, believing that how we birth and welcome our newborns can have a lifelong effect on their ability to trust their outside environment. She recognizes birth has she recognizes birth as a means of transformation and a significant event for forming a healthy psyche. And her book came out the year I fell pregnant. So I am one of her case studies, you would say. I picked it up and it changed my whole perspective and it spoke my language. And so I am really excited to share this space with you, Robyn. Welcome.
Thank you, Quinne. What a lovely box. Thank you, Quinne.
So good. Well, let's dive in and just explore in this space. One of my first questions is, why do you think it's important for parents to become conscious in the parenting landscape? And how do you think it will affect our society overall?
You know, I was working as a soul integration facilitator, which is a process of using active imagination where you enter into the deeper levels of the psyche to kind of uncover the negative patterns of behavior that impact on the way you are in life, including birthing and parenting. Right? And what I discovered when I was doing this soul integration work was how many people had birth trauma as one of their major negative uh, uh, like starting points. That the birth trauma caused them to become somewhat disconnected from their bodies, caused them to become withdrawn in their emotional sphere, caused them to cut themselves off from their inner wisdom and knowing, which we might call their kind of spiritual essence and so on. Not cut it off altogether, of course, but to limit their connection to it. And so as a result of that, I studied to be a midwife. So I only became a midwife after I had done the soul integration work and figured out that it was quite painful and difficult to enter into this world in a way, or it's difficult to do so in a way that is trauma free, but it's not impossible. And so I also wrote Mama about the way to encourage parents to be more aware of the way that they give birth.
Mhm.
And when I say the way that they give birth, I kind of mean the way that they give birth in terms of their emotional state of mind and also their ability to be present and heartful towards the baby.
Mhm.
Um, Not so much, do you give birth through a cesarean section or vaginal delivery and stuff. Um, Interestingly, and this is very unexpected to me, unborn children don't seem going to um, be as affected by that as they are by emotional disconnection from their parents.
Mm.
Sometimes the two go together, I have to say, but
Yeah.
this kind of ability that we have even in a birth climate that is very kind of skewed towards these births with quite a lot of interventions and so on. Even within that, we can still have conscious births where the babies are warmly welcomed, where they're self-loved, where they have a deep psychological and spiritual connection to their
Mm.
parents. So
Mm.
that's my work, is to help parents to set that up, preferably even before the baby is born, so that it's already present and that they can meet the children in a different way.
Oh, yes, I've got goosebumps because as a doula, that's been one of my big things is to move away from this natural birth, cesarean birth, and really bring it home to that connection that you're talking about. And that I essentially learned through my meta practice, but you affirm and teach it in such a integrated way. So yes. And then how parents move forward into their ongoing birthing and laboring as the child grows, I always say, that then that consciousness that is born with them getting that soul connection that you speak of, obviously. Wonderful. Yes. Hear that, everybody,
And
please.
sorry, just to add to it, is
Mm.
this kind of thing that when you do the soul connection work to the baby, or when anybody does, the it's quite sacred kind of what you really get um, to feel into on a very visceral level the sense of the soul quality of the baby that's going to be born. And of course, on a soul quality, on a soul level, we are all incredibly wise and unconditionally loving and so on. And so there's a potential for parents to really connect in to that aspect, and it has a different flavor for everybody
Yeah.
of their baby, so that when they meet it, they don't see this baby as this helpless infant that they are entirely kind of responsible for, who has no kind of sense of autonomy themselves and so on. They do. They have an amazing sense of bringing in with them a vast amount of, well, soul purpose for a start, and wisdom and so on.
Oh,
Much
yes.
more than we have as adults, because we close down to so much.
Yes, we start just reacting to our immediate reality and sort of forget where we come from. I want to relate with you on that because when I connected with my baby, with Charlotte, who's now 10, and when I had a very beautiful connection with her during pregnancy, I had visceral dreams and lots of time to connect with her also. And what came through was that she was this fiercely independent soul. And I dreamt that she just wanted to fly. So here's the relatingness to into now. Then when she started to walk and climb and everything, I never had this sense of anxiety that everyone else around me had. I've always trusted her. The moment she starts climbing or want to go into a tree, she climbs to the top, and I've never felt anxiety around that with her specifically because my second daughter was different. And so speaking into that, they come in very much with their own sense of autonomy, and that eases that sense of responsibility. It puts it in a different perspective. Ooh, it's delicious. I love it. Okay, so
And can I add one more thing?
yes.
Because, you know, I mean, I studied the soul integration work in 1994. I think we began it in 93, finished in 95, something like that. Anyway, and so I've worked with many parents on connecting to their uncle babies. And And I don't think I've ever come across anybody whose child doesn't reflect when they're born what the parents actually perceived when their baby was in the womb through the unborn child work and also through dreams like you're talking about. So there's some, and the amazing thing about it is that it's actually, a lot of people think that they have little connection to their imagination, but there's a lot, it's a lot easier when you're pregnant. And by pregnant, I mean the both partners in the relationship because you're both pregnant. And
Absolutely.
and there's a sort of a dropping of something of the barrier between the conscious and the unconscious, so the dreams become much more vivid as you mentioned and so on.
Oh,
It's
thank
a
you.
bit easy for parents to actually connect with their babies.
I agree. Yeah. And so that's really why I want to keep going is focusing on this work you do with the connection to the unborn child and how that influences our transformation and our children's experience of the world. And I want to talk more about that because I want us to really give people the opportunity to understand how you do that work. And so let's go there.
Okay, let's do that. um, so it's a process of active imagination, which is a Jungian term, and that sounds very simplistic, that you just simply imagine what it is that your child is like and so on. But in fact, the imagination is the language of the deeper levels of our consciousness. That's why when we dream, we have images and so on that symbolize what it is that we need to work through or let go of or whatever in our waking world. And so using imagination to connect in with the child actually reflects always something of how each of us individually is in the world. So if I am to imagine something very simple, like I imagine kind of a pair of scissors or something, and you are to imagine a pair of scissors, we will imagine the scissors doing something different, each of us, because um, it will be flavored by our own individual experiences and conditioning, and also our collective, the conditioning that we've brought with us through our cultural collective awareness and so on. And so it's a process of becoming deeply relaxed through a guided relaxation, and then connecting to our own inner wisdom, which takes symbolic form. So inner wisdom, I refer to it as the higher self because that's an easy term for people to relate to. Because what we need to do is we need to almost raise our um, what I might call vibrational frequency or our level of emotional well-being to a place that resonates with more joy, love, compassion, and so on. Because that's the level at which the unborn child is resonating. So when we're connected to our higher self, to our inner wisdom, it's much easier to establish the communication between unborn child and our waking self. And so you're not in a deep state of hypnosis or anything, it's just simply a process of following the imagination, connecting to the unborn child, often letting go of blocks and shadow stuff that is in the way of this process happening. But everybody manages to do it. I mean, I don't think I've ever had one person who didn't actually manage to do it. So it's a easy place kind of moving into a place of feeling trust around the potential that we have to imagine in order to create that connection. And then through the connection, finding out from the child, it's not prophetic. You don't want to find out uh, what kind of birth it wants to have or what's going to happen, or whatever. Although very often the children can be quite reassuring and stuff. It's much more about tapping into the quality of its energy and finding out what it needs in order to be well supported on this journey that it's
Mm.
embarking.
And imagine if everyone did that, like really tuned in and then, because the interesting thing is when I work with young parents, you know, really young parents, they just sort of go, just slot into my life. We're just going to carry on as before, almost not wanting to always acknowledge the transformative quality that having a baby, a human being coming through your family into this reality can offer you. And when we don't acknowledge the transformation or the essence of that being coming in and how to make space for them and honor them also, people, that's when that overwhelm happens and it's disconnected. It's the disconnection I feel, wouldn't you say?
And on a global level or on a collective level, um, if we can have birth experiences where the babies are not disconnected from their own soul wisdom when they're born, and they don't need to be at all. I mean, they don't want to be. It's just it gets arrested because there's too much
Yeah,
happening, like a fear and so on around the whole kind of perinatal period in a way.
yeah,
And if we can manage to not birth our children in a way where they become disconnected from their own inner wisdom, we have a completely different society. Because actually, part of the reason why uh, birth is quite violent is because our lives are so violent. So it sort of matches the level of edginess, of chaos
yeah,
in our own lives, kind of matched in our birthing kind of process and so on. And as soon as we become conscious and we start bringing our awareness back to how to create love in birth and so on, we're creating a completely different society. Because if we're not disconnected at birth, then the potential is that we stay more open through our lives if we're supported by our parents to do so. And in staying more open, with our hearts more open, we're more connected to one another, to finding kind of solutions and so on. I don't need to tell you this, I mean, you understand it all anyway. And also to being very much more connected to Mother Earth and to what the
yeah.
environment wants to us as well.
Exactly. No, it's beautiful the way you say it and put it into perspective because you also work with professionals and teach some of this understanding to medical practitioners, don't you?
I'm not doing it at the moment, but I did for many years. I was
Mm.
working with medical students on compassionate care, so in their obstetric rotations while they were in fourth year and fifth year. Um, there are still people that are carrying on and still doing that work. It's still
Oh, good.
available at CCC in the fourth and fifth year of obstetric,
Mm.
obstetric kind of modules. Um, and then I've also worked in the government facilities with all the staff in the MOUs, which is the midwife obstetric unit,
Yeah.
um, where there's a lot of kind of sense of being like seriously overwhelmed, there's a lot of work that people have to do there and very, very little opportunity for debriefing and so on. So I was working with a program that I set up with a couple of other people called the Compassionate Birth Project,
Yes.
which is around kind of encouraging people to actually listen to themselves and to appreciate one another and to listen to one another and so that some of the stress that is kind of it's just part of the work environment uh, in maternity and actually I mean maternity it's a high stress job
It
maternity
is.
because we're dealing with life and death and a huge level of responsibility and
Yes.
enormous amount of responsibility.
And it's incredible
So
what happens with people when they feel the weight of a responsibility. And I feel as if this work that you do and even just going in and saying listening to each other and teaching compassion, eases the weight of the responsibility, which almost becomes reactive, and brings it back to, and it's just my favorite thing to break it up and say, create more of an ability to then respond. And so then there comes the ease, um, with our interactions with each other, and easing that weight, because yes, they do. They have so much. So that is amazing that you do that. And I want to go into, because we're both South African, and many of the other speakers are international, but you understand the South African landscape, which is where my heart lies. And I'm here, and I see such trauma and such a diverse landscape where there's just so many different ways and perspectives. Whew, what do you think? How could we begin to affect change? And I think the work that you do is a starting point, and to just give it over to parents and say, this is, if we want to see our societies shift, how we live, because right now you said, the birth is sort of mirroring how we live, and it's violent, and there's a lot of survival mode going on. How do we, just change our perspective and shift into living more kindly, I guess?
You know, um, it sounds as if you are very aware of all of this, but it's a sense of how, um, as you say, we're living in such an incredibly violent society. I mean, the world is violent, um, in the way that we treat one another, even if we're not throughout the world, everybody's not killing one another. It's there's a level of kind of anger and chaos and violence that I wasn't even aware of when I was a child, even though as a child we were living in, I was living in apartheid South Africa, which is a desperate place, actually. And so, but historically in South Africa, we've built up trauma. There's a huge amount of trauma in the psyche. And there's also a lot of trauma um, in the belly area around kind of for females this kind of sense of safety in the lower belly area, the very um, tender place.
Mm.
It
Mm.
needs to be treated as sacred and precious and so on. And in our society, it's not. And I think that's worldwide. And so, in order um, to kind of heal through that, I think that it also requires, it's not just about um, listening deeply, appreciation, love, and so on. It's also about being courageous enough. Courage, the word courage comes from heart. So,
Yeah.
courageous enough to be present to what we're carrying that is um, hurt and wounded. And so in order to really bring love in, we have to also love that which is wounded in ourselves. And so part of the work, it's not all love and light. I love, there was something that Jung said, which I might not be quoting exactly, but he said something about in order to become conscious, we do not um, imagine figures of light. We make the darkness. We bring the darkness into consciousness. So it's kind of like we have to embrace the shadow in order to become centered and feel in that kind of light state
Yes.
of creating a more loving society.
Really not be afraid to look at it. Pull up the courage. And I love that about Jung. It's really acknowledging the shadow. And when you work with parents going into their personal birth trauma or past, where they come from, and the stories that lives within their cell memory, acknowledging that, so that once it's seen, we can actually move it or do something with it. But if we just keep tucking it under the bed or into the dark corners, not much to do. Before we close off, I really want to talk about Mama Bamba. And your book and what inspired you in the first place to write it. And if you could now, I mean, it's 10 years later, add or take anything away, would you, if you would?
Mm, it probably add to it, I suppose. I mean, of course, we keep on learning as
Mm,
we live and so on. So no doubt if I were to write it now, it would be a different book or
mm,
something. Uh, but um, but I feel like it's a it's a good foundational kind of place to tap into that sense of bringing a bit more care and love into the birth and stuff. And then when you asked about Mama Bamba as well, I mean, there's a Mama Bamba way, which is the talk, but there's also a Mama Bamba as an organization. And and at the moment, I've just brought in a partner in Mama Bamba, and we're growing the organization in a way that's good. And inviting in all these different um, people to bring their wisdom and expertise into the kind of birthing space. So much like you're doing, actually, by
wonderful. Yay, that's awesome. But back in that day, what inspired you to write it or to, and where
So
does
I
the
had
Mama
I
Bamba?
studied I studied midwifery um, between 2000 and 2004, and I did it by distance learning. So the theoretical portion was distance learning, obviously the practical one. And then I was working in a mission hospital in Botswana. I was living in Botswana,
Oh wow.
and I just had written so much during um, my studies that I felt was, and I'd researched such a lot and so on, and then I started kind of really working, and then I moved on to Cape Town and started working here and stuff, and it just felt like there was a need to bring it all together somehow, and then really kind of address the underlying emotional stuff and um, embrace all that and so on as well. And also because um, I wanted to bring in some of the sort of more spiritual aspects of that as well. I used to work in hospice, and birth and death have a very, very similar quality to them. They both feel like a space of an open door where
Mm.
um, the veils of illusion are very thin at that time. And so I wanted people to become more aware of that.
Mm.
Did I answer your question?
Yes. Oh, it sounds amazing, and being in Botswana, and yes, and you did. You for me, because I mean I was newly pregnant, and I I understood the relevance of the prenatal time of our lives, and how that affects, because I'm of metamorphosis. But I was young, and there was so much I didn't understand. And like I said, your book really made all of that and more so accessible, and took so much fear away, took so many unknowns that we don't even, like I said, that shadow side we don't want to acknowledge, and it just brought it made it easy to look at the whole thing. I really loved it, and I gave it to a doula client of mine to borrow. So I'm like, now I just want it back, back on my shelf. Anyway,
And then
um,
put the name out here. Well, maybe she'll listen.
yes, please give it back. No, but I'll get another one too. I think everybody should have a copy. So on that note, please tell us about your free gift, your offering, that everyone can click on and really delve into the work you do and make contact with you.
So I think that what we spoke about in terms of the free gift was a free ebook for Marabamba, but I'm very happy for it to be more than one. Maybe we make it the three free ebooks or something like that for people who um, would like to sign up to that.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
and then
So,
and it's possible to get them kind of through my website when
yes.
when you and I when it's all together. So, Not sure
Perfect.
how it works. I don't
Yeah.
know how, yeah. Are they winners or is it just like whoever? First come, first serve.
I think so. So what we'll do is everyone, you guys can click on the link and follow through to Soul Integration website, Robyn's website, and you will make contact with her. And whoever's first for how many books she makes available, you will be so lucky. And if you're not, get the book anyway and just join her in her work. She has so much to offer and will only enrich your life. So, Robyn, thank you so much for joining us today. Your wisdom and your experience and your perspective is absolutely relevant, and I feel a sense of ease already. And I hope everybody that's listening will spread the word about how to move towards this sense of ease, love, connection, and getting back to our ability to really respond. So thank you so much for joining today's Parenting Summit.
Quinne,
Yeah,
I see all the time. I just want to end with this.
sure.
All the time, I see people who are doing that. People are doing that all the time. Just making more conscious choices, actually kind of transforming the way that they are looking at this sense of bringing babies into the world and what it means to be a parent as well. It's like it's not this kind of idea that maybe that will happen in the future. I see it happening all the time.
I agree with you. I agree with you because, and there's this generation of parents coming in where we want to do things differently. And that's what I want to speak into on this summit is really learn to trust that inner guidance because that's where it lies, that connection with your baby and your child and being present and being conscious and aware of yourself in the space with your child. That being present is so big. That's where the guidance lies. There's not many rights or wrongs, but there is love or fear. So let's choose love. And I want to thank you for joining the Conscious Parent Summit. I'm your host, Quinne Brown Huffman, DOULA Quinne. Just love.